are live. We are live. It's just firing up. The machinery is happening. We are rolling, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear nice and clear what we're up to. But welcome. Welcome to another episode of A Walk on the Wise Side show. I am your host, Prash Katecha, founder of Stress to Success, and here with another powerful, informative, and very talented guest to bring wisdom, insights, and learnings to help empower, enlighten, and hopefully navigate through these difficult times. And this episode is all about navigating. It's about navigating uncertain situations or novel situations through understanding complexity and seeing how we can make powerful inroads as we move through this epidemic out of the other side. And with me is somebody who I just spent 2-3 hours talking to on the first conversation when I met him. A long time. Our special guest today is Chris Bramley. Chris Bramley, let me give a few words about Chris, and I'm going to let him say more about this himself. Chris Bramley is, well, what is he? What is he not? Chris Bramley is a multi-genre author, and one type of writing he does is something you probably would never have expected. He's a multi-genre author. He is a TEDx speaker. He's a doer of things. He's a speaker, a consultant, and a coach. He navigates uncertainty. He speaks about complexity, human learning, many other skills that are used in and out of enterprises and with high-performing individuals. But I'm going to let him say more about himself. Chris, welcome to A Walk on the Wise Side.
Thank you very much, Prash. Yeah, so it's great to be here. Great to talk to you. It's kind of hard to know what to say after that kind of introduction. It's very kind.
Rockstar introductions, man, but it's all truth.
I don't know if people will find it that surprising to know some of the stuff that I write about, given some of the swords and the fact I've got a beard and long hair and whatever else. But yeah, definitely write some proper fantasy and stuff. So, but yeah, so I also look at learning, as you said, and complexity and various other bits and pieces. And I'm creative, right? I do creative stuff. So I'm a musician and I'm a writer, and I draw really badly sometimes and occasionally okay. A couple of other things like that. So yeah, a doer of things is right. You know, I think it's one of the really important things for humans to understand is the ability that we all have to learn to do multiple things. And I think it's very easy for us to be intimidated by people who do a lot. And you shouldn't be. You should be inspired, because we can all do it. It just depends on how much you want to. So that's why I do a lot of stuff. I've been inspired to go and do lots of stuff. I'm not anything particularly special. So go do stuff.
I love the fact that, you know, as you say, you've delved into so many different areas. I know one of the areas, just one of the many, is around the area of human learning. And I think what I find fascinating is in our conversations, you had an ability to draw the learnings and the lessons from your diverse area of interests, whether that's mixed martial, and we didn't touch on that, mixed martial arts, combat. Obviously, you've got the swords behind you, archery, climbing, bouldering, and you're taking lessons and learnings from those areas, and you're somehow able to synthesize them and then use them in a corporate landscape for leadership, for teams. Can you speak to that? What is allowing you to do that, and what's inspired you to do that we can learn from?
Yeah. So really, everything comes down to learning, right? Humans are learning machines. It's actually what we do best, which is why we're so successful. And, you know, we kind of touched on it before. Humans excel at change. And I said, you know, this is probably the first line in my TEDx, right? Humans excel at change, but we love comfort so much. We will pretty much do anything to preserve that comfort because we love it.
Right.
And so, you know, this requires you to, and this is a very overused phrase, but step outside your comfort zone, which I agree with, but also have problems with, which I can talk about a little bit later. You can go a bit deeper into that kind of thing, and actually have enough stress and change required for you to learn and grow and perform optimally. Now that translates into whatever you're learning, whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting in a boardroom. It doesn't matter whether you've got a guy twice your size trying to kneel on your throat while you're doing, you know, mixed martial arts or whatever.
Mixed martial arts.
But
Yeah.
everything, like, you know, there are parallels between everything. I mean, I wrote an article a little while ago about scuba diving and Cynefin, which is complex adaptive systems theory. And it's got some very basic core concepts, right? Scuba diving can be complex and it can be ordered and it can be chaotic and it could be all of these things. It could be complicated and clear, all of this stuff. But when something occurs underwater, you can't overreact. You do a little mantra that you've got, right? Stop, breathe, think, respond. Because that's all you can do when you're 30 meters underwater. You haven't got much choice. And that applies to pretty much everything, you know. So in different Cynefin domains, like in different domains of complexity, you can say, you know, you can analyze and then sense and respond and do various other things. It's a very similar kind of thing. So
when you're talking about transferring, when you're talking about that, and you use the analogy to stop, breathe, connect, and respond. For somebody who's in a leadership position, trying to navigate and trying to create a course correction and lead their team through difficult times like this, clearly these are times of uncertainty.
Yeah.
What lessons could we weave from those worlds that you've been in that could be really put into the boardroom, especially when we're in a remote boardroom?
So I think, oh, you seem to have frozen.
It looks like we drop off for a moment, so do bear with us.
Hang on a sec. Am I back?
Shortly.
I can hear
Let's
you now.
wait to see if Chris
I can hear you back.
Might glitch in broadcast, so bear with us.
Hello, Prash. Hello. I'm definitely back, apparently. Let's give it a try. Hi, Prash. Not sure if you can hear me. Always fun having a couple of technical difficulties. Well, I think it's still streaming. And I'm sure everyone out there is not as excited by it just being me. But if you are out there listening, I guess we'll wait to see if Prash comes back. Might have had a technical difficulty his end. What was I talking about? I was talking about complexity and what you do and how you translate it through to leadership. It's quite an interesting one. Let me just give Prash a quick quick call. He's just tried to call me.
Sorry, I'm not sure what's happened. I'm not quite sure what's happened here.
You appear to be disconnected. It says it's still streaming live.
Yeah, and it's odd because my laptop is in a small temporary loop, so I shouldn't be connected. So I'm just trying to sort it out, whatever it is at the moment.
Yeah, no worries. I mean, I'm not sure if people are still listening, so I can always keep talking, I guess, but I can also stop.
I can just keep talking for now, and then we'll just pick up the thread, and that's fine. We'll just pick up the thread. I'll recap a little bit for people, and we'll dive straight back in.
Sure, no problem. Okay, I'll carry on what I was saying then.
Yeah, just carry on lightly. Just be aware you might just have to replay it a little bit, but it's all good.
No worries. I got time. Okay.
Doing it now, yeah.
Okay. So it looks like Crash is trying to get back in. It's fun for him. So I'll see if I can fill in until he manages to get back. So translating stuff like that through to leadership and leadership decisions and so on, it's very interesting because leadership is a type of expertise, and expertise is very prone, although expertise within its own context is very, very useful and very required. For example, with the pandemic, we should be listening to the kind of experts who have experience with molecular virology and epidemiology and immunology and all these kind of things, as opposed to social engineers who normally deal with stuff within society. This is where a different context is required. Leadership is a type of context, of expertise as well in their own context. The problem with expertise is, especially in complexity, it's very easy to form patterns, and we all operate based on what are called first fit mental patterns, which are often based on emotional decisions, right? So leadership are as prone to this as anyone else. And when you look at how leadership operate, where they have more decisions to make in less time, it can be very difficult to make an accurate decision. So being able to stop and breathe and think and respond accurately, and this is, I'm sure I'll go into this back when I catch Prash again in a minute, hopefully. But this kind of ties into the importance of, distributing cognition and various other things. It's very important to understand where those mental patterns come from and how leadership can actually start looking at raw data to make contextually applicable decisions that are much more accurate, rather than operating based on rituals, which is unfortunately one of the biggest problems with bureaucracy. Oh, looks like he's back. Excellent. Here we are. I think I've just been boring everyone to tears while you've been away. Oh, can't hear you at the moment.
You may or may not have. Let's see. Who exactly have you been boring? We don't know.
I know.
And I don't want to be the one who's missing out here. So let's just see if we're streaming all right. Let's pick up the thread. Folks, if you've tuned in here, apologies. Such is the uncertain nature of the times we live in. Right here, we have uncertainty and complexity turning up on our doorstep while we do these interviews. And there you go. I've just had to put in a backup plan B, get the stream going live again. Such is the funny way, right, Chris?
Crisis management. We all have to deal with it occasionally. I'm just glad I don't have to work fixing this anymore.
Cool.
Yeah.
Keeping cool. We've got to still stay cool.
Stop, breathe, think, respond. Funnily enough.
Right there. Breathe, right? Let's just back up online. Let people know we are rocking and rolling again. So Chris, let me just, folks, for those of you who might have missed some of this, I apologize. We had a few gremlins. Let's just quickly talk about, and let's just backtrack ever so slightly. My special guest today is Chris Bramley, who's Christopher Bramley, who's here to talk and share a few insights on how we can navigate uncertainty and understand complexity. And there's only so much we can put into this time, but I was inspired to invite Chris to share some of the nuggets he has, because he's one of those exceptional people who does a hell of a lot in and outside of his corporate life. And I don't know somebody who can suffer the weight of a fully grown athlete on his neck in a martial arts fight climb mountains and boulders and
Not a lot of
cliff
fun.
hang, play music, work with ancient weapons, and still go into a training environment and teach leaders how to navigate uncertainty and bring his wealth of experience around human learning. So that's what fascinated me to share Chris with all of you in the hope that you might learn something as well. So Chris, backtracking where we were.
No worries. I would argue that ancient weapons actually are more useful in a boardroom situation than you might think. But
well, well.
sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. So Chris, let's, I mean, we touched on it a little bit before, and let's just backtrack a little bit.
Yeah.
We talked about comfort zones, and, we talked about how that's a cliched phrase, but we do need to look at them. But also you had a different view. Let's bring in psychological safety. What is it? And, why should we care about it?
So psychological safety is a vast and fascinating subject, and it very closely links to, empathic quotient and emotional intelligence, and and your CQ, I think it is, or whatever it is that you've got, which is a similar kind of thing.
Yeah. Yep.
Is that for compassion?
That's for consciousness.
Oh, consciousness. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Brings in
Yeah.
consciousness, spirituality, self-awareness, and a whole raft of things right there, and the intersection between CQ and EQ naturally.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, psychological safety is a really, really interesting kind of area, and I think comfort zones are a very interesting bridge between that and learning. And learning is heavily bound into this, and this is one of the reasons that learning is like the core structure of everything that I do, is because everything we do is learning. So as a very quick kind of, I do this a lot, so apologies, but I dive off on tangents. A very quick tangent. All humans learn the same way, and we don't think that they do because we've specifically built structures of teaching, but actually we all learn the same way. We form neural connections, and whether that's in our cerebral cortex or motor cortex, muscle memory, whatever, right? That's how we learn. The trick is in the engagement, and we have two types of engagement that I've been studying, which is our cultural engagement, which is to do with the language we speak natively, traditions within our culture, various other things. And then we have individual engagement, which is to do with our upbringing, family units, individual neurology, neurodiversity, all that kind of thing. So this is kind of how we learn, and learning requires an understanding a little bit of comfort zones and how they work, and also psychological safety, because you are learning best when you're psychologically safe. Right. So this is everything that I do. People always say, oh, so you're a teacher or a trainer or you're a this. And it's actually very holistic, which makes it very difficult to tell CEOs what I do, because they want an elevator pitch, right? But it's all holistic. So psychological safety basically works on the basis of, more or less, we're all excluded at the beginning from things, and to start becoming psychologically safe, we have to be included, right? That the first level of this is kind of inclusion. Right. And then after the inclusion, we get to the point where we can learn. Okay, so we're starting to be able to take information in, we're included in what's there, the foundation is there, we can begin to learn these things. And by the way, I'm not a psychologist. What I do touches on psychology and sociology and philosophy and loads of other things, but I'm not a PhD in any of these specific areas. But then after the learning, we get to the point where we are psychologically safe enough to start contributing. And then after that, we've got the kind of the pinnacle of psychological safety, if you like, which is where we can challenge, right? So being fully psychologically safe means that we feel included in what's happening. We have the ability to learn from it because we're not too far outside comfort zones into panic and anxiety and whatever else. We feel we can contribute to the matter at hand, and we can challenge it if we find that that's important. And that's something in complexity we talk about, like respectful dissent is actually where collaboration lies, not with alignment, and they are two different things. But I can talk about that in a bit. So,
well, I want to connect. What's the connection between psychological safety and uncertainty and navigating uncertainty? What's that intersection point? Because there's a convergence, right? One would say that, if you feel a certain degree of psychological safety, you're going to be able to have a certain modicum of brain stuff to be able to dive into some degree of complexity, and then use that that cognitive consciousness and awareness to then navigate uncertainty. Could you speak to that a little bit, and how
Sure.
professionals and leaders could actually take advantage of that?
Yeah, so uncertainty is basically like the default worst place for humanity. Like we hate it. We hate it more. So we prefer bad certainty than a potentially good uncertainty.
That's an interesting take. Now, yeah.
Right. So uncertainty is not psychologically safe for us. And there was a study done by University College of London, if I recall correctly, where they wired people up to electrodes, and they had a little kind of game where you moved a rock, and if there was a snake under it, you got zapped.
Right.
And the people who were getting zapped like 20% of the time were
Right.
pretty relaxed. They were like, I'm probably good, right? 80% chance I won't get electrocuted. All good.
Yeah.
The people who got the snake about 80% of the time, they were a bit more stressed, but they knew they were probably going to get zapped. So they were prepared for it. And they were like, this sucks, but it is what it is.
It is what
The
it is.
50% showed the highest levels of stress because they just didn't know. Uncertainty is really psychologically unsafe for people because we don't know what's going to happen. So for example, you've got Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you're probably aware of. It's a pyramid, and you kind of got all the opportunity and learning and all these cool things up at the top, and at the bottom you've got, can I eat, can I breathe, can I live, can I do basic stuff, right? And although I am an exponent of take every opportunity to learn, be inspired, do all of this, take the opportunity during the pandemic to learn new things if it's psychologically safe. And that is if you are in balance. And that's the important part, because you shouldn't be telling people that they're failing at learning new things if they are literally only concerned with their needs.
With their needs. Yeah, it's the wrong level of that.
Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, it's quite a deep subject, but it's interesting.
So moving from having that understanding of psychological safety, where do you think people fall down in failing to handle complexity?
So there are a number of ways that I could answer this, but a really simple way of putting it, and this applies to leadership, this applies to pretty much everyone, is when we feel uncertain, we try to do something. I spoke about this in my TEDx talk, which is how we kind of learned to collaborate, which is humans try to order the world around them, right? We are creatures that like to put order in, but we are not ordered at all. Humans are complex. We do random stuff for no reason. We like to think we're logical. We're not logical at all. So, but we try to order the world around us, which is fine when you can order it. But when it is a complex system, or it's a human created complex system, or we're trying to order people who are complex, you cannot order people. Like they are not causal. So you're trying to introduce causality to a situation or a system that doesn't have it. So yeah, so basically one of the biggest problems with complex situations is thinking we're in a different domain than we are, thinking that we are in an ordered domain, or trying to manage a complex situation as we would manage an ordered one, right? So you can't manage them the same way.
So speaking to that, I'm reminded of that famous Einsteinian quote that, a problem is not solved at the level of consciousness that it was created at. I'm paraphrasing here. Does that play into it? And, if there is truthism in that Einsteinian quote, what can we do to reorientate ourselves better? What do you guide leaders to do to say that, okay, stop playing at this level, look at it from this level, or look at it from this angle, or maybe step the hell away, right? And have somebody else come in and give you that view, because you're too close to it. You're too subjective. You're not emotionally self-regulated enough to handle that situation. You're not detached enough.
Yeah, you're leading straight up to one of my favorite quotes, which I've littered throughout a number of my books. It's hard to navigate when you're too close to the sun, right? If you're too close to the sun, it's just here, and half the universe is fire, right? So either you need to be distant enough to use it to navigate, or somebody with outside context, which is usually me, will come in and help you sustainably discover that navigation for yourself. So with complexity, it's very interesting. You cannot manage it the same way you manage a complicated or a clear system, right? Because they're causal, they're ordered, you have rules. very set out, step by step, this is how you do it. And this makes me, I look at stuff on LinkedIn and there are some really valuable hacks out there, but it makes me chuckle when they get applied to everything, because you cannot cookie cutter or template success across different contexts. No. And that's where the problem lies. There is no 3 easy steps to deal with a complex situation, because when you're in complexity, you have to probe safe to fail, right? So some of this stuff will fail, and failure is a whole big psychologically unsafe area for all humans, right? We hate failure, but there is no failure. There is only feedback. This is my basic tenet of learning, right? The failure comes from not listening to that feedback, right? And that's the really important part. So you expect failure, you learn from failure. And when you look at things like ecosystems, which are kind of self-managing complex systems in a way that have apex predators and blah, blah, blah. They self-create hierarchies, they self-organize, and failure is a part of the balancing for success of the ecosystem, right? So failure is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, it's definitely not a bad thing.
See, I love that. I love the take that I love your take on it. And we hear this, right? There's no such thing as failure. There's only feedback. But that's a powerful lesson, certainly from, my background and my passion areas, consciousness intelligence, working with esoteric practices, the Eastern traditions, weaving them into corporate practices here. It's a massive feature in Eastern learning paradigms about the need to be able to bake in failure, the need to be able to self-accept and self-reflect and know that actually this will be along my path. I will fail. We're often taught by Western applied psychology that never consider you'll ever fail. Don't ever let failure enter your mind. But this is a very different concept, especially for a leader to say, you know what, I'm a leader. I will be failing, but I'm going to go learn from my lessons. And I think a great example of that is Jeff Bezos. Now, I remember listening to an interview where Bezos says that he actively empowers his teams to go and make decisions and fail. He actually says we have a degree of budget, awareness, and bandwidth to allow our teams to fail. We want them to fail because that's where they'll pick up and they'll go. And the fact that that's coming from a leader top down, I think it creates it must increase psychological safety for starters.
But that's agility, and that's culture as well, right? So culture is defined by the actions and inactions of leadership within a company, and inaction is a really important part, right? Because you can say be agile, implement it below this level, and if the leaders aren't agile, and I'm not talking about agile as a cargo cult, but agile as in the concept of agility in mindset, in organization, in every team, not just software development. That you become agile at every level. You don't implement agile within a team. Like that's just not how agility works. And that's really important, and it's cultural.
That's a powerful meta understanding, right? To see things. I like the way you say that, and that's one of the things I enjoyed in our previous conversations. How you're able to take notions or trainings or methodologies like agile and actually just stretch it out. It's a feature, and I think it's a quality that as leaders and as trainers and consultants, it's something that we should be really aspiring for and educating and empowering people with, to take a learning from over here and apply it over here. And by taking something like that, and I think contextual application. One of my good friends, Robert Bruss, ex-military, he's navigated and taken so much of his trainings from that world where he was in 2 of the Australian Armed Forces, and he's brought that into entrepreneurship, how he helps businesses to succeed and so forth. And he says he takes a lot of those things, a lot of notions like terms that you hear in the military, like task saturation, decision fatigue. And he's able to navigate those into the boardroom or into businesses and show people how they can actually use that. And that's what I'm finding fascinating with what you're talking about here, taking that agile mindset, stripping out the cargo cult side of it, and actually seeing that you can use it here. Which of course also means that now you can take that Einsteinian view that a problem can be solved better at a different level of awareness or consciousness, because now you're giving yourself the scope to do that, because you're not compartmentalizing everything, but you're able to step back how did you say, step away from the sun, take a couple of light years
Hard to
away from the
navigate
sun.
when you're too close to the sun. Yeah, but you're also constrained. So complexity is a lot about constraints. And actually, what's more important than these four domains, which one you're in, is not as important as how you transition between them. And there are liminal domains and stuff I'm not going to get into now, and like confusion and upper ear and stuff like that. But it essentially, you know, you do have also constraints from mindsets that people have. And this is, I was saying just, I don't know if anyone heard me, but just before you came back on, so you asked about leadership and stuff, and there are a number of problems that leaders have. And one of them, or several of them actually, are to do with inaccurate data and summarization or reductionism of data before it reaches them. So it's very hard to make accurately strategic decisions. But also the fact that you are literally, basically, you know, if you're C-suite, you're basically an expert at being C-level within companies, which means you have this peculiar attribute to expertise. And expertise is, you know, absolutely required within context, specific context. But outside that context, it's actually a problem because you have inattentional blindness, because you are taught to think in a very specific way. So you will not see what is outside that. So you categorize instead of allowing sense to emerge from whatever you're trying to deal with. It's quite an interesting.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And that could go into a whole other conversation about the intersections between intentional blindness and unconscious bias, and how this plays out in teams, how it plays out in situations, and why people are blinded, and why the military, for example, while it has a hierarchical command, there's a lot about there was one great guy who I had the pleasure of interviewing just a few months ago, pre-COVID, Bryce Hoffman, author of Red Team Thinking. He brings that idea in about, you know, having a team of people and having that hive consciousness, bringing people's individual skills, so you reduce the chance of intentional blindness happening.
It's distributed.
That is very powerful.
Yeah, distributed. So one thing I was going to say, humans aren't, and this is something Dave Snowden of Cognitive Edge says, and I agree with him. Humans are not built to make individual decisions, and we do it all the time. We were built, we evolved tribally in communities to actually make cognitively distributed decisions. And we tend to make much better ones when we make them together, as opposed to individually, because individual emotion, first fit mental patterns, all these kind of things get in the way.
Yeah, I like that. And I think it speaks to, for me, it also draws out the importance of becoming emotionally intelligent, more emotionally intelligent as a leader, because one of the key cornerstones of emotional intelligence in leadership is emotional self-awareness, which is a quality of, you know, CQ, becoming that self-aware person and having a certain degree of self-regulation where you can actually go and see the warning signs coming up ahead of the line, and recognizing that, wait a minute, this is a decision that is better distributed, worked out together with a team, with my peers and so forth. But then recognizing the dark side of that, which is social proofing. So, you know, it's one thing seeking the cognitive buy-in of the collective people around you, but then the other side of that, which is so excessive social proofing, which is driven by validation, and then you're certain blindsided.
Yeah, that's where, but that's where alignment comes in. And so people say, you know, we need to be aligned on this. And actually, I've been saying for a while now, we shouldn't use the word aligned, because it depends. It's not so much the alignment, it's how we become aligned. If you go into a meeting and it's a consensus meeting, like some of my clients, and you've got, this is the point, and everyone has to meet up, it can take you a day to get there. If you come in kind of like a funnel and you learn through the meeting together, you end up aligned at the other end. But that's more of a collaboration. Alignment is very similar to groupthink. As long as we all think the same way, we're good. And actually, that is a stifling of innovation. That's a stifling of being able to shift paradigms and see things in complexity and probe. And so, like, respectful dissent is really important, because it allows you to probe all the different variables to find a new emergent, better pathway to a better goal, rather than fixating on one perfect goal within systems thinking and blah. And again, this is another rabbit hole. I tend to pick up on these quite a lot, but it's really, really interesting how we kind of make these decisions.
So, I mean, kind of drawing some concluding points here that we can take away with which key elements? We've talked about respectful dissent. We've talked about intentional
inattentional
uh,
blindness.
yeah, intentional blindness, or willful blindness. How can we take some of these notions to become more self-aware leaders, to become more cognizant of where we might be we might be our worst blocker in making a headway through complex and difficult situations?
So that I would say, just as a kind of quick tie up, there are three things that we could do. The first thing is to realize that becoming less bureaucratical and allowing, not allowing rules to be the defining part of our lives, because it's very lazy and very easy to do. It's a structure that eventually exists only to validate itself, essentially, not for the outcomes the business should produce. Stopping relying on that and becoming more of an ecosystem or an entrepreneurial approach doesn't mean that you're losing decision-making power, right? No. If I take all the fish in different tanks, and some of them are really big, and I put them all in a lake, the biggest fish are still the biggest fish. They are the apex predators of the system, essentially, and an ecosystem automatically arranges itself around apex predators, right? So it's a very interesting thing. It's like a trophic cascade or a phase shift or whatever. So that's one thing. Being able to make decisions based on more accurate data. One of the problems with leadership is you have less time to make more decisions, essentially, right? And so we try to pare that down to the minimum. Don't take that too far. If you get to the point where you don't feel you should spend any time at all making decisions, in my opinion, you shouldn't be making those decisions. You still have to be aware of the elements within that to make a strategic decision. So being able to look at raw data, not data that has been intermediated by a number of other people who will have political agendas, interpretations, and they will summarize and reduce that data. Being able to granularize raw data and read that instead will allow you to make more accurate strategic decisions. And I guess the last bit is realizing that all of us have limitations based on our expertise, myself included, and I'm just trained to think in ways outside that, and I think in lateral ways anyway, but I'm subject to it the same as every single other human being. And if any human thinks they're not, they're wrong. We all are, right, in our specific ways. So being able to take a step back and say, this is going to be painful, because nobody likes being wrong or having their personal narratives challenged, but I'm going to get outside context for things to try and get a wider view of stuff outside my own vision. And then you can start testing or probing all of these things, including the ones that you think, and you may well find that actually things outside your area are going to be better ways forward. And it's having the resilience as a leader and building your own amount of psychological safety, which is important as well, to be able to say, let us now look at these, because is it about the output your bureaucracy is producing, or is it about the outcomes your organization is trying to achieve? Which one are you looking at? It's kind of where it comes to.
I like that, because thanks, Chris, because it also nicely for me, it nicely feeds into that area of conscious leadership about the light and the dark of the ego, and recognizing that ego isn't bad. It's about recognizing which aspect of the ego are we being driven by, and the dark side of the ego would tell us that we've got it under control. We know exactly what we're doing. The old style way, the way I've always done it, is the way it's always going to be. The fact that it's always worked before means it's automatically going to de facto work for the future. And it closes you to want to go and look at that raw data. It closes you to want to be able to go and open up that red, bring that red team thinking in.
Context,
and it causes you to stay close to the sun, right? You're too close to the sun and you don't recognize it. The light side, the ego as a conscious leader, means that you're able to wait a second, check yourself, self-regulate, course correct, or just raise your hand and say, look, I'm too close to this. Let's reach out. And as you say, we're meant to be social. We have that thing that we're working with a group, we're working with a tribe, and it's reaching out and recognizing where we need to go and step that back, and recognize that certain rules don't flow for us. And and in the spirit of having Oriental martial weapons behind you. Let's quote Bruce Lee's famous words about the art of fighting without fighting, not having rules. The whole Tao of Jeet Kune Do, when he wrote that, when he had his post-fight accident and he was hospitalized, was all around the idea that you have constructs, but you're able to fluidly meander between these things without solid rules. The Tao of Jeet Kune Do. Flow and be like water.
You're talking about basically the difference between rules which are set and heuristics which are usually best. So this works very well. There was a really interesting study done by Hans Monderman over 400 towns throughout the EU, or Europe rather, including a couple in the UK, if I remember correctly. And it looked at bureaucracy on the road and how if you actually remove road signs and everything else, and you just have like in complexity, you'd call it a bounding constraint, like basically don't drive on pavements and at 100 miles an hour and kill people and whatever else, like bounding basic constraints. Within that, people actually, this is a very famous thing, and this is how a lot of leaders are taught to think. If you do not take control and maintain discipline, there is chaos. And it's not true, because we did this on the roads. Like, this was an empirical test done multiple times. You remove all of this and people actually self-regulated, self-managed, their speeds dropped, the safety went up. Like, it's very, very interesting. If you remove the white line down the middle of a road, the white line allows you, if a car comes across and hits you head on and you say, well, you're on my side of the road, you've removed human accountability from it. The rules are there to take the accountability and set it out. If there are no white lines, you make eye contact with the car coming towards you and you both slow down because you're like, what are you doing? Right? Because you don't want to hit a car. So accountability returns to people at that point. Yeah. So it seems like chaos, and chaos may reign very briefly, but chaos is actually a higher energy state than complexity, and it will collapse down into a complex system, probably not that far after it. Crisis can't go on forever. Right?
It will go that way.
Something will happen, right? An action will be taken or a direction will be taken, and it introduces constraints into a system that has no constraints, and suddenly it will start defining a complex system. It will start building. It might not be an optimal one or a good one or whatever, but it will start doing that. So yeah, it's a very interesting way of looking at it. So when you start looking at ecosystems, it's actually about, in terms of a company, and you were saying about, all the weapons and so on, what you're really doing is saying, using heuristics within a bounding constraint allows people to self-define and manage. But if you invest every agent or every person within that ecosystem, they will all work for the success of that ecosystem or company because they're part of it. If you isolate them all and you don't listen to heretics and mavericks and outliers and whatever else, and you compartmentalize, it's just a job and they don't care. They're just a component in your machine. Why would they care? And why would you care? And that's one of the biggest problems we have at the moment with the lack of humanity in business. It's not optimal for the outcomes that we want. So.
That's incredible input, Chris. We definitely hit some truth bombs in this session right here. And folks, if you've stayed with us till the end, despite the technical glitches, which were of course a perfect example of real life uncertainty hitting us, hopefully you've got some powerful takeaways as well. Chris, do you want to just leave us with what's on your radar, and what do you have that you may want to invite people to?
Yeah, so I've actually, funnily enough, today is one of those busy days. I've got another talk later, which is probably going to be about an hour long, touching on a lot of the same points, but it'll be kind of more of a hybrid talk, discussion, workshop, Q&A, where basically I just invite people to talk and tell stories and be part of it, kind of thing. So people are more than welcome to have a look at that. And I've got a few bits and pieces coming up, and you're welcome. If you want to know more about what I talk about in terms of learning and complexity, you can go and suffer my TEDx talk if you like. And the last thing I was going to say was, we touched on it very briefly earlier. I've also done a video speaking about kintsugi, which is the Japanese art of fixing basically broken pottery with.
I love that video.
Yeah,
I was a big fan.
Yeah, so, and that's a definite part of accepting our lessons as part of who we are, and using that as part of our unique strength, rather than denying failure, denying things that have happened to us. So that ties into mental health and psychological safety. So you're welcome to go and look at those as well.
Yeah, brilliant. What we'll do is, in fact, folks, what we'll do is I'll dig up the link and I'll pop it right here in the comments on the feed, so you can conveniently go and have a look at that. That was a real truth bomb right there, Chris. I really like that video. So,
Thanks.
and on top of that, I hope you don't mind, I'm just going to say it for you. You also are a published author. I've seen I've seen
Yeah.
some of the interesting books that you have on Amazon. So look up Christopher Bramley. You'll recognize it's the right Christopher Bramley. I'm not going to say how or why, but you will know. Check Chris out on Amazon. And The Gentle Iconoclast, your YouTube channel. You are invited, folks. If you want to take a trip down a few rabbit holes, get a bit bruised and scathed down the way, but come back certainly enlightened and empowered in some way, and nourished intellectually.
Brain dump central. And actually in complexity, we started talking more about entanglement versus enlightenment. So you entangle people together and new opportunities emerge from those linkages.
Emerge. Absolutely. The Gentle Iconoclast on YouTube. Go check out Chris. And for myself, folks, as I've said it before, I'll say it again. There is a need more than ever for leaders to blend EQ and CQ, bring those conscious leadership skills, emotional intelligence, learn to navigate the ego, to improve our abilities to navigate difficult times, and to lead our teams to build better engagement and ultimately better profits and bottom line. But as Chris says, it needs a team to work together. We want to include everybody. We want to embrace D&I agendas. And so if you want some help to do that, reach out to either of us or both of us, and we will have a chat and see how we can work with your organization to help you to navigate those times, bringing in our diverse skills and, I dare say, a little bit of wit and wisdom along the way to help you in your organization's needs. So if you know somebody,
Perhaps.
drop us a line and we'll get in touch, and we'll bring our samurai swords to a boardroom or a Zoom room near you. That's it from me as well. Chris, thanks for being in. Such a great sport.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you all for being with us as well, folks.